Hello and welcome to Story Verdict. Today I'm going to tell you the story of the soldier in the kitchen and the empire that reclaimed its king. The first time my mother told me I belonged in the kitchen instead of at the family table, I was 19 years old, wearing a torn sweatshirt and holding an envelope that contained my withdrawal papers from Westbridge University. The second time she said it, I was 34, standing in the ballroom of the house where I had been born, surrounded by senators, investors, military contractors, and executives who had no idea that the man carrying their empty champagne glasses controlled the corporation they were all desperate to impress. 10 years had passed since my family threw me out and declared me a disgrace. But the expression on my mother's face had not changed. She still looked at me as if my existence were a stain she had been unable to remove from the Miller name. "You are not a guest tonight, Logan," she said, pushing a folded black uniform against my chest. "Guests are people who contributed something to this family. You disappeared for a decade. The least you can do is work." Behind her, the mansion glittered beneath thousands of warm lights. A string quartet played near the grand staircase. Waiters in white gloves moved between towering arrangements of winter roses, and above the marble fireplace hung a 30-foot banner that read Miller Industrial Systems, 30 years of excellence. My father's portrait had once hung there. My mother had replaced it with an enlarged photograph of my younger brother Liam, smiling beside the company logo, as if he had founded the business rather than inherited it. I looked down at the uniform she had given me. It belonged to the temporary catering staff. The jacket was cheap, the sleeves too short, and someone had attached a plastic name tag that read Luck. My mother knew my name. She had chosen not to use it. "You invited me," I said. "I sent you an opportunity to make amends," she corrected. "Do not confuse generosity with respect." 10 years earlier, words like that could have broken me. That night, they landed on a part of me that had already survived bullets, captivity, betrayal, boardroom coups, and the construction of an empire so carefully hidden that even my own family believed I repaired industrial equipment for a living. I turned the uniform over in my hands and asked what she wanted me to do. Satisfaction softened the corners of her mouth. She mistook my calm for surrender, just as she always had. "The main staff is overwhelmed," she said. "You can help in the kitchen, clear plates, carry drinks, whatever the supervisor tells you. Stay away from the head table. Liam has important people here, and I will not have you embarrassing him." "What exactly do you think I would say?" I asked. Her eyes moved over my plain dark coat, my scarred hands, and the old steel watch on my wrist. She saw what I had intended her to see: a tired man with no visible signs of wealth, no designer suit, no entourage, and no claim to the room. "The truth about your life would be embarrassing enough," she said. "You threw away a university education, vanished without explanation, and returned with nothing but calluses. Liam has spent 10 years building this company while you were playing soldier or mechanic or whatever fantasy you used to avoid admitting that you failed. Playing soldier." I almost smiled. My mother did not know that 3 hours earlier, the Secretary of Defense had called me personally to discuss an Aegis satellite network protecting Allied military infrastructure across 3 continents. She did not know that the steel watch on my wrist contained an encrypted biometric key capable of authorizing the movement of assets worth more than Miller Industrial Systems had earned in its entire 30-year history. She did not know that the faint scar beneath my jaw came from a mountain operation, whose details would remain classified long after everyone in the ballroom was dead. She certainly did not know that the $50 million contract Liam planned to announce that night had been approved by a company I owned. I took the uniform. "Where is the kitchen?" I asked. "You remember," she said. "It was always where you were most useful." Then she turned and walked toward the ballroom without looking back. Her dress was deep green, the color she wore whenever she wanted to appear maternal in photographs. Reporters called her Evelyn Miller, the iron matriarch of American manufacturing. Employees called her Mrs. Miller even when she was not present. When I was a child, I called her Mom until the word began to sound like something I had borrowed from another family. I remained in the corridor for several seconds, listening to the orchestra and the rising hum of conversation. Through the open ballroom doors, I saw Liam standing beneath the banner, surrounded by executives. he had grown heavier since the last photograph I had seen. His hair was carefully styled, his tuxedo perfectly fitted, and his hand rested possessively on the shoulder of a state senator whose campaign Miller Industrial had recently funded. Liam was 5 years younger than I was, and had been treated as the natural heir from the day he learned to speak. When he broke something, I was blamed for failing to supervise him. When he failed a class, my mother accused the teacher of bias. When he wrecked his first car, my father bought him another and told the insurance company the accident had been caused by a mechanical defect. The rules of our childhood were simple. Liam's mistakes were evidence that he needed protection, and my mistakes were evidence that I did not deserve it. I carried the uniform into a guest bathroom, changed my clothes, and looked at myself in the mirror. The catering jacket strained across my shoulders. The plastic tag sat crooked over my heart. Luke. I adjusted it, washed my hands, and left my coat folded beside the sink. Hidden inside its lining was a small red leather case containing the seal of the chairman of Aegis Global. I had brought it because I knew my family intended to force a signature from me that night. What I had not known was how eagerly they would confirm every warning my legal team had given me. The kitchen had changed since my childhood. The old wooden cabinets were gone, replaced by stainless steel stations, warming ovens, refrigerated counters, and enough imported equipment to serve a hotel. Yet the smell brought back memories immediately. Butter, smoke, onions, hot metal, and the faint citrus scent of cleaning solution. When I was 9, I used to hide beneath the preparation island while my parents argued in the dining room. My father's voice would rise first, then my mother's, then glass would break, and eventually one of them would remember I existed and order me to clean the mess. That kitchen had been the safest place in the mansion because it was the only room my parents rarely entered unless they wanted something. Now more than 20 workers move through it in controlled chaos. A catering supervisor named Denise saw my uniform and pointed toward a stack of silver trays. "You are late," she said. "Take those to Station 3. Then start clearing the west tables." I obeyed. She had no idea who I was, and I had no reason to make her job more difficult. For the next 40 minutes, I carried trays, replaced glasses, collected plates, and listened. Service work teaches you how invisible people become when they hold something others want. Guests spoke freely around me because they did not think I mattered. 2 bankers near the windows discussed the emergency restructuring of Miller Industrial's debt. One said the company had missed 3 covenant targets in 6 months. The other said a new contract might delay bankruptcy but would not solve the underlying cash problem. A city official told his wife that Liam had been begging for tax concessions. A supplier complained that Miller Industrial had not paid him in 90 days. A venture capitalist said the company's technology division was using patents developed 15 years earlier and repackaging them as innovation. None of it surprised me. My intelligence division had already produced a complete financial and operational audit. Miller Industrial Systems was not merely struggling, it was collapsing. Liam had borrowed aggressively to fund acquisitions he did not understand, then used short-term debt to cover operating losses. He had dismissed experienced engineers, replaced them with cheaper consultants, and diverted research money into luxury offices, private aircraft, and a marketing campaign built around his personal image. The company still possessed valuable land, several manufacturing facilities, and long-standing government relationships, but almost every liquid asset had been pledged. The $50 million Aegis contract was not an opportunity. It was the final piece of scaffolding holding a condemned structure upright. I knew because I had designed the contract to expose exactly how desperate Liam had become. 6 months earlier, Miller Industrial had submitted a bid to provide armored energy modules for Aegis field installations. The bid was mediocre, overpriced, and technically inferior to 3 competing proposals. Ordinarily, our procurement team would have rejected it in the first round. I instructed them to continue negotiations. I wanted to see whether Liam would improve the product, strengthen compliance, and prove the company still contained something worth saving. Instead, he falsified testing records, concealed supplier failures, and bribed a subcontractor to certify materials that had not met specifications. Every step was documented. My board believed I intended to destroy Miller Industrial through litigation. I told them I had not decided. Some part of me still remembered my father walking me through the original factory when I was 6, placing a yellow hard hat on my head and telling me the company would one day belong to both his sons. My father, Richard Miller, had not been a gentleman, but he had been a builder. He began with 12 employees in a rented warehouse and created machines that kept bridges, mines, and power stations operating. Before wealth made him suspicious and pride made him cruel, he loved the physical honesty of steel. A beam either carried its load or it failed. A weld either held or it cracked. There was no public relations department capable of negotiating with gravity. I had inherited that part of him. Liam inherited the part that wanted to be admired. I carried an empty tray through the ballroom and stopped beside a column where I could observe the head table. My mother sat at the center. Liam stood near the stage rehearsing with an event coordinator. Beside my mother was my Aunt Rebecca, who had sent me a brief message 2 weeks earlier warning that the family planned to sell the ancestral property north of the city. The property was more than land. It contained the original Miller farmhouse, the private cemetery where my grandparents were buried, and nearly 800 acres of timber, water rights, and mineral access. My grandfather had placed the estate into a family trust divided equally between my father's children. My share could not legally be sold without my consent. For 10 years, my mother and Liam had pretended I had no claim. Now they needed my signature because the bank holding their primary debt had demanded the land as collateral for an emergency refinancing package. They believed I would sign in exchange for being allowed back into the family. They had no idea the bank no longer held the debt. 1 week earlier, Aegis Capital Partners had quietly acquired every senior loan, secured note, and defaulted credit facility attached to Miller Industrial, the mansion, the factories, and the ancestral estate. The acquisition had been completed through 3 entities to avoid alerting Liam. When the final transfer closed, I became the sole controlling creditor of the Miller family's business empire. I own no voting shares, but debt has its own form of sovereignty. A shareholder hopes a company succeeds. A secured creditor decides what remains when it does not. "Luke," a server whispered, pressing 2 glasses of champagne onto my tray. "VIP table, be careful." I approached the head table. My mother was speaking to a retired judge. Liam saw me first. Recognition spread across his face, followed immediately by delight. He had always enjoyed cruelty more when there was an audience. "Look who finally found employment," he said loudly. Several people turned. My mother gave him a warning glance, but not because she disapproved. She preferred public humiliation to appear accidental. Liam took one of the glasses from my tray and examined my name tag. "Luke," he read, "they did not even trust you with your real name?" "Perhaps they were protecting the brand," I said. The retired judge laughed before realizing Liam had not. My brother leaned back in his chair. "I heard you work with welding equipment now." "Sometimes. In a repair shop?" "Sometimes. Mom said you move from contract to contract." "I have traveled. That is a polite way of saying unemployed." He turned toward the other guests. My brother always had difficulty committing to anything: university, family, reality. My mother touched his sleeve. "Liam, tonight is about the company." "Exactly," he said. "The company he abandoned." He looked back at me. "You know, Logan, if you had stayed, you might have managed one of the smaller maintenance divisions by now. Dad was prepared to give you every advantage, and you threw it away because you could not handle one difficult semester." I placed the second champagne glass in front of my mother. "That is not why I left." "Then enlighten us." My mother's posture stiffened. She had spent 10 years controlling the story. According to her, I dropped out because I lacked discipline, disappeared because I was ashamed, and refused contact because I resented Liam's success. The truth was less convenient. During my second year at Westbridge, I discovered that one of my father's defense subsidiaries had been delivering defective hydraulic components to a military contractor. The failure rate was dangerous. I reported it internally. Liam, who was interning in finance at the time, had helped conceal the testing data because admitting the defect would have cost the company a major contract. When I confronted him, he told my father that I had stolen confidential files and intended to sell them to a competitor. My mother believed him without asking to see evidence. My father gave me a choice. Sign a statement accepting responsibility for the unauthorized access or leave the family immediately. I refused to confess to something I had not done. He canceled my WASN, froze my accounts, and ordered security to remove me from the house. 3 weeks later, I enlisted. I could have explained all of that at the table. Instead, I said, "Tonight is about the company." Liam smiled as if he had won. "At least you learned your play." I returned to the kitchen. My restraint was not weakness, it was timing. In the military, the person who reacts first often reveals the most. I had learned to wait. I joined the army under my full legal name, but the Miller family never searched beyond the easiest explanation. My mother told relatives I had entered a vocational program. Liam said I was repairing trucks. When I completed selection and entered a special operations unit, there was no public announcement. My work disappeared behind classification levels and operational names. I spent years in deserts, mountain corridors, coastal cities, and places that did not appear on maps used by civilians. I learned languages because survival required it. I learned technology because modern wars were fought through data as often as bullets. I learned to distinguish courage from performance. Some of the bravest people I met never raised their voices. Some of the most decorated men broke when no one was watching. I also learned that institutions failed, for the same reasons families did. Leaders protected favorites, inconvenient truths were buried, and loyalty was confused with obedience. The operation that changed my life took place in a border region, where a private military contractor had abandoned an intelligence team after a political agreement collapsed. Our orders were to extract 12 people from a facility surrounded by hostile forces. The official plan assumed we had 6 hours. We had 90 minutes. The communications network failed. The evacuation route had been compromised. We built a temporary defense system using commercial drones, damaged surveillance equipment, vehicle batteries, and software, written by a communications specialist named Mara Voss. We held the perimeter long enough to evacuate everyone. 3 soldiers were wounded. 1 died in the aircraft beside me. The contractor responsible for the failure later attempted to blame the casualties on unpredictable conditions. Mara and I documented the truth. That investigation destroyed the company and revealed a larger problem. Governments had become dependent on security contractors who sold confidence instead of capability. After leaving active service, I used my savings and a small group of former operators, engineers, intelligence analysts, and cybersecurity specialists to create Aegis Tactical Solutions. Our first office was an abandoned freight depot. We slept beside equipment cases and ate from vending machines. Our first client hired us to secure a medical supply route through a region controlled by criminal militias. We succeeded where 3 larger firms had failed because we understood that security was not simply armed guards. It was logistics, communications, local intelligence, infrastructure, trust, and accountability. 1 contract became 5. Tactical Solutions became Aegis Systems, then Aegis Global. We built satellite networks, autonomous defense platforms, emergency power systems, cyber resilience tools, maritime security programs, and crisis response units. We acquired smaller companies without stripping them for parts. We recruited veterans, scientists, translators, field medics, and engineers who had been overlooked because they lacked polished backgrounds. We grew quietly because public attention creates vulnerabilities. By the time financial publications began speculating about Aegis ownership, the company operated in 42 countries and held contracts with governments, humanitarian organizations, infrastructure networks, and private corporations. I kept my identity concealed through holding structures and a private governance charter. Publicly, Mara served as Chief Executive Officer. I was listed only as the founder of an early predecessor company that no longer existed. Within Aegis, however, everyone knew the red shield seal. It appeared on directives that required the authority of the chairman. In 10 years, I had used it fewer than 20 times. I had carried it into the Miller mansion because I suspected my family would give me a reason to use it again. At 9:30, the event coordinator dimmed the ballroom lights. A film began showing the history of Miller Industrial. My father appeared in old footage beside his first factory. The sight of him tightened something inside my chest. He died 6 years after expelling me. My mother sent no message. I learned from a newspaper article 3 weeks after the funeral. The film showed Liam entering the company as vice president, then becoming chief executive after my father's death. It did not show the factory closures, lawsuits, safety violations, or debt. Instead, heroic music played beneath images of Liam cutting ribbons, shaking hands, and standing near machines he could not operate. When the film ended, he walked onto the stage to applause. 30 years ago, he began. My father built Miller Industrial on a belief that American courage and American innovation could overcome any challenge. I stood near the rear wall holding a tray of untouched desserts. Today, that legacy enters a new era. A graphic appeared behind him. Miller Industrial Systems plus Aegis Global. The room reacted immediately. Investors leaned toward one another. Reporters raised cameras. My mother placed a hand over her heart as though overcome by emotion. Liam waited until the noise subsided. I am proud to announce that Miller Industrial Systems has secured a $50 million strategic manufacturing contract with Aegis Global, the world's leading private security and defense technology group. Applause erupted. The musicians played a triumphant chord. My brother smiled beneath the lights, unaware that the contract displayed behind him had not yet been fully executed. Aegis Procurement had signed a conditional letter of award, subject to final ethics certification, material verification, and chairman-level confirmation. Liam had announced the deal before satisfying any of those requirements, because he needed lenders and investors to believe the rescue was complete. This partnership, he continued, will create hundreds of jobs, restore American manufacturing leadership, and secure the future of the Miller legacy for another generation. His eyes found me near the wall. It also proved something my father taught me. Empires are built by those who stay, not by those who run when responsibility becomes difficult. A few heads turned toward me. My mother did not look ashamed, she applauded. Liam raised his glass. To loyalty. The room echoed the word. I thought of the soldiers who had carried one another across open ground. I thought of the analysts who had refused bribes, the engineers who had slept beside prototypes, and the families who received folded flags because contractors had valued profit above truth. Liam used loyalty as a decoration because he had never paid its price. I placed the tray on a service table and walked back toward the kitchen. My Aunt Rebecca intercepted me in the corridor. She looked older than I remembered, though her eyes remained sharp. They are going to call you into the library after the speech, she whispered. The documents are ready. The waiver? She nodded. Evelyn told the attorneys you had already agreed. I have not spoken to her in 10 years. She said your return was proof of consent. That is not how consent works. Rebecca looked toward the ballroom. They are desperate, Logan. The company cannot make payroll next month without the Aegis payment. The bank wants the North Estate added to the collateral package. Your share is the only obstacle. Why warn me? Her expression shifted. Because your father knew you were telling the truth. The words struck harder than I expected. About the defective components, he discovered it 2 years after you left. Liam admitted altering the files, but your mother convinced Richard that exposing him would destroy the company and the family. Your father wanted to contact you. He did not know how. He knew my name. Rebecca lowered her eyes. Pride is often cowardice dressed for dinner. Before I could respond, the library doors opened. My mother stood inside beside Liam and 2 attorneys. Logan, she called, now. Rebecca squeezed my arm and returned to the ballroom. I entered the library. The room had once belonged to my father. Dark shelves covered the walls. His desk remained near the windows, but the framed photographs of both sons had been replaced by pictures of Liam receiving awards. On the desk lay a legal document nearly 20 pages long. Beside it were a fountain pen and a glass of whiskey. Sit, my mother said. I remained standing. Liam removed his tuxedo jacket and loosened his tie, performing exhaustion for an audience of 3. Let us finish this quickly, he said. I have investors waiting. One of the attorneys introduced himself as Howard Price, counsel for the Miller Family Trust. I knew his firm. Aegis had acquired one of their distressed clients the previous year. Price explained that the ancestral estate needed to be consolidated under a revised trust structure to ensure efficient management. He avoided the words sale, debt, and collateral. I asked whether he represented me. I represent the trust, he said. Then you do not represent me. Your interests align with the family's. That is not an answer. My mother sighed. This is exactly the behavior I feared. You have no understanding of law or business, but you insist on making everything difficult. I picked up the first page. The title read Irrevocable Declaimer and Waiver of Beneficial Interest. It did not merely release my claim to the North Estate. It waived every current and future interest in the Miller Family Trust, including mineral rights, intellectual property, voting rights, insurance proceeds, and claims arising from previous mismanagement. It also contained a confidentiality clause, prohibiting me from discussing the circumstances of my departure. This document says I acknowledge receiving fair consideration, I said. What consideration? Liam laughed. Being welcomed back into this house should be enough. That is not consideration. You see, my mother said to Price, he learned one legal phrase and thinks he is an attorney. I turned another page. It also says I confirm that I voluntarily abandoned my educational and professional opportunities and caused reputational harm to the family. That is the truth, she said. It is your version of it. It is the version that matters. Liam poured himself whiskey. The land belongs with the people who protected it. You left. You do not get to return when there is finally something worth taking. The estate was worth taking 10 years ago. Not to someone living in welding shops. You seem very interested in what welders own. His smile sharpened. Do not pretend. We know what you are, Logan. Mom hired an investigator. You have no house registered in your name, no significant investment accounts, no corporate employment history, and no public business ownership. You move between countries using government travel records we could not access, then disappear for months. Whatever uniform you once wore, it did not make you important. You are a hired hand with delusions. Their investigator had found exactly what Aegis Security intended him to find. I turned to the signature page, and if I refuse, my mother folded her hands. Then you will leave tonight, and this family will never acknowledge you again. No funeral notices, no inheritance, no contact. You will be legally and socially separated from the Miller name. You already did that 10 years ago. We left the door open for redemption. You left the door open because you needed my signature. Liam slammed his glass onto the desk. Enough. You want honesty? Fine. The land secures the refinancing. Without it, the company could lose $50 million in additional credit. Thousands of people depend on us. You have contributed nothing. But one stubborn signature could destroy everything Dad built. The Aegis contract is $50 million. The contract is the beginning. Once Aegis works with us, every bank in the country will extend credit. Assuming the contract survives due diligence, he smirked. It has already been approved, has it? I negotiated directly with their senior acquisition team. Did you meet the owner? Aegis does not have one public owner, it has institutional leadership. So you did not. Liam stepped closer. You think questions make you sound intelligent. They do not. They make you sound bitter. He pointed at the document. Sign it, take whatever dignity you still have and leave. You are a welder, Logan, nothing more. Do not dream about Miller property. My mother touched his arm, but she was smiling. She had waited years to hear him say what she believed. I looked at the two of them and felt something inside me become quiet. Until that moment, I had not been certain what I would do with Miller Industrial after the debt acquisition. Part of me had considered restructuring the company, protecting its skilled workers, removing Liam, and allowing my mother to retain a portion of the estate. I had prepared options that would preserve my father's original factories and give the business a path forward under responsible management. I had even arranged a private pension guarantee for long-term employees if the company entered receivership. I had told myself that justice did not require cruelty. Standing in that library, I realized mercy offered secretly to people committed to harming you becomes another form of self-betrayal. I will sign, I said. My mother relaxed. Liam's smile returned immediately. Howard Price moved the pen toward me. I ignored it. Instead, I reached inside the catering jacket and removed the red leather case. The room became still. I placed it on the desk, opened the brass clasp, and took out the heavy seal. The handle was black iron. The base carried the image of a shield crossed by a single vertical line. Liam stared at it. What is that? My signature. I lifted the document's final page and placed it over a blotting pad. From the case, I removed a narrow stick of dark red sealing wax and a compact ignition tool. My mother stepped forward. "Do not damage the document." I melted a small pool of wax beside the signature line. The color spread like blood across the cream paper. Then I pressed the seal into it and held it there. No one spoke. When I lifted the handle, the shield symbol remained in perfect relief. Howard Price's face changed first. He leaned closer, recognition struggling against disbelief. The red shield had appeared on international agreements, classified procurement notices, and corporate filings linked to Aegis Global's highest executive authority. Most people knew the symbol existed. Almost no one had seen the physical seal. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "It belongs to me." Liam laughed too loudly. "You bought a souvenir. I closed the case. Keep the waiver." My mother looked from the seal to my face. "You have not written your name." "The document says I may execute through an authorized personal mark." Price swallowed. He had drafted that clause for trust beneficiaries unable to sign conventionally. "Technically, that may be valid," he said. "Then we are finished." I turned toward the door. Liam grabbed my sleeve. Instinct moved through me before thought. I rotated my arm, broke his grip, and shifted his balance without striking him. He stumbled against the desk. The whiskey glass fell and shattered. My mother gasped as if I had attacked him. "Do not touch me again," I said. Liam's face flushed. "You think you can walk out after threatening me? I did not threaten you. You are nothing." "You announced a $50 million contract tonight." He stared at me. "What does that have to do with anything? You should enjoy it while it exists." I left the library. In the corridor, I removed the plastic name tag, placed it on a silver tray, and walked through the ballroom in the catering uniform. Liam returned to the stage minutes later to continue celebrating. I could hear applause as I collected my coat from the bathroom. Outside, cold air moved across the front steps. The mansion's windows glowed behind me, every room filled with people congratulating my family on a future that had already ended. A black sedan waited near the lower drive. Mara Voss stood beside it, wearing a charcoal coat. She had been my communications specialist in the mountains years earlier. Now she was the public chief executive of Aegis Global and one of the few people who could challenge me without hesitation. "How bad?" she asked. "Worse than the report. Did they make you serve dinner?" "Dessert, mostly." Her expression hardened. "I can have a response team remove every executive badge from that building in 6 minutes." Not yet. I opened the rear door, but did not enter. The orchestra continued inside. Mara glanced at the catering uniform. "You were right about the waiver." I handed her a photograph I had taken of the document. "It releases all trust claims and admits fault for my departure." "Did you sign?" I sealed it. She looked at me. "The chairman's seal?" "They wanted my separation from the family formally recognized." "And you gave it to them?" "Exactly." Mara almost smiled. "What is the order?" I took my encrypted phone from the sedan. One missed call waited from Daniel Cho. "Aegis General Counsel." I called him first. "The waiver is executed," I said. "Upload the image," he replied. "Did counsel witness it?" "Howard Price?" Daniel exhaled. "That is almost poetic." "We can use the disclaimer to defeat any later claim that the debt purchase was an undisclosed family transaction. They insisted you had no continuing interest. That was the intention. Do you want the contract suspended or terminated?" I looked back at the mansion. Through the ballroom windows, Liam stood beneath the Aegis logo, raising another glass. "Terminate it for ethics violations, fraudulent certification, and material misrepresentation. Effective immediately. There will be consequences for their workforce. Activate the employee protection package. Secure the 3 viable plants through the receivership entity. Preserve payroll for essential operations." Daniel paused. "You are saving the workers while taking the company." "The workers did not forge the records." "Understood." "What about the debt?" "Issue notices of acceleration at midnight." "File the emergency receivership motion with the evidence package." The judge already reviewed the provisional submission. "We can have the order before dawn if the final default occurs." "It will." "And the mansion?" "The residence guarantees the executive credit facility." "Include it." Mara studied me while I ended the call. "You planned all of this before coming. I prepared for possibilities. That is what you call it when you have helicopters fueled, court filings drafted, and a private restructuring team waiting at an airfield. Preparation." She opened the car door. Your family has no idea who they invited into the kitchen. They did not invite me, they invited a signature. At 10:23, as our sedan passed through the estate gates, Aegis Procurement transmitted the termination notice to Miller Industrial Systems. The message cited falsified test reports, concealed safety failures, bribery concerns, and breach of the company's ethical certification requirement. All negotiations stopped immediately. The conditional $50 million award was revoked. A copy went to Miller Industrial's board, legal counsel, lenders, auditors, and relevant regulators. Liam received it while standing beside the anniversary cake. I know because one of our internal investigators had been seated near him. The investigator later described the sequence precisely. Liam read the subject line, frowned, and walked away from the guests. He called Malcolm Serrett, Aegis Vice President of Acquisitions, who told him the order had come from the chairman's office. Liam demanded the chairman's identity. Malcolm said he was not authorized to disclose it. Liam threatened litigation. Malcolm replied that Aegis welcomed formal discovery. That ended the threat. My mother joined Liam in a side room. They called Howard Price, who was still carrying the waiver bearing the red seal. Price asked them where I had obtained the mark. Liam said I was pretending to be important. Price searched the Aegis governance registry and discovered that the seal represented the authority of the company's controlling founder. He advised them to locate me immediately. They called my old number, the one I had deliberately kept active for family contact. I did not answer. At 11:14, Liam sent a message. We need to discuss a misunderstanding regarding your employer. That was the first sign he had decided I might work for Aegis. At 11:26, he wrote, if you have any influence with them, this is not the time for childish revenge. At 11:41, my mother left a voice message. Logan, whatever you have done, you will correct it. Your brother's announcement is public. If the contract collapses, the damage to this family will be permanent. For once in your life, think beyond yourself. She still believed the contract had been canceled because I complained to a supervisor. She could not imagine authority in me because recognizing it would require questioning every judgment she had made. At midnight, the acquired loans formally entered accelerated default after Miller Industrial failed to cure the ethics-triggered cross-default provision. Aegis Capital Partners became entitled to demand immediate payment of $53,800,000, including accrued interest, penalties, and secured obligations. The company did not have the money. Its accounts contained less than $900,000 in unrestricted cash. At 12:15, Daniel filed the emergency receivership motion with the commercial court. Attached were financial records showing insolvency, evidence of fraudulent certifications, threatened asset transfers, and emails indicating Liam intended to sell trust land through a related entity and move proceeds offshore. The filing also revealed that senior debt had been consolidated under a single creditor. My name did not appear. The creditor was Bastion Recovery Holdings, wholly owned by Aegis Capital Partners, controlled by the Aegis Global Trust. At 1:10, a duty judge issued a temporary preservation order freezing major asset transfers. At 2:45, after remote testimony from auditors and bank representatives, she appointed a receiver over Miller Industrial's secured operating assets. At 3:20, the order expanded to include the mansion because Liam had pledged it personally against the executive facility and had failed to disclose an existing tax lien. The order authorized the receiver to secure the property, preserve records, remove unauthorized occupants from restricted business areas, and protect collateral. It did not authorize chaos. Everything had been prepared legally because power without discipline becomes the thing it claims to oppose. While my family made frantic calls, I was at Aegis Air Command reviewing the employee plan. The command center occupied the upper levels of a former military aviation facility outside the city. Glass walls overlooked illuminated runways. Digital maps covered the central screens. Analysts tracked global operations in real time. On one side of the room, a crisis team handled a cyber attack against a European hospital network. On another, logistics officers coordinated evacuation support after flooding in Southeast Asia. Aegis was larger than any revenge I could bring into it. That mattered. I had built the company to protect people from instability, not to settle family arguments. If I used its power carelessly, my mother would be right about one thing. I would be acting only for myself. Mara joined me at the conference table. Daniel appeared on screen from the Legal Operations Center. With him were Helena Ruiz, the court-appointed receiver, and Colonel Isaac Ward, head of Aegis Domestic Security. Isaac had served beside me during my final deployment. He had a scar across his scalp and the unnerving calm of a man who had survived situations too serious for theatrics. "The order is active," Helena said. "We will secure the headquarters, data servers, and executive residence at first light. Local law enforcement has been notified. A deputy marshal will attend the residential action." "No weapons visible unless required," I said. Isaac nodded. "Our personnel will be in corporate security uniforms, body cameras active. No forced entry if occupants cooperate." "What about the employees?" Mara asked. Helena opened a file. "Bastion will fund temporary payroll in exchange for a priority operating certificate. The receiver can keep the viable plants open. Non-essential executive spending is frozen immediately." "Pensions?" I asked. "Protected under the proposed restructuring. Supplier arrears? Critical small suppliers paid first." Daniel leaned closer to his camera. "There is another issue." Liam attempted to transfer $2 million from the company reserve account at 1:30. The preservation order blocked it. The intended recipient was a trust in the Cayman Islands, controlled by his wife. "Add it to the fraud referral." I said. "Already done." Mara crossed her arms. "And Eveline?" Daniel looked at me. "She is a co-grantor on the mansion facility and a trustee who approved the attempted land sale. She may face civil liability. Criminal exposure depends on what she knew about the certification fraud and asset transfers. Do not manufacture charges. We do not need to." The room became quiet. Isaac placed a garment bag on the table beside me. "Your uniform arrived." I looked at it. "That is unnecessary." "The ceremony is not." 5 years earlier, the government had awarded me the Distinguished Service Cross for an operation that remained partly classified. I had received it privately in a secure facility, attended by 6 people. Later commendations followed from allied governments and intelligence agencies. I rarely wore the decorations. Isaac believed Dawn required them. "You are not going there as an angry son," he said. "You are going as the chairman who gave a lawful order and the soldier they accused of playing dress-up." "A helicopter is already dramatic. The helicopter is operationally useful." Mara looked at him. "You selected the aircraft with the largest visible Aegis shield. Operational visibility prevents confusion." Despite myself, I laughed. It was the first time that night. At 4:30, I changed into the dark ceremonial uniform reserved for special military occasions. The fabric felt unfamiliar after years in civilian clothes. Rows of ribbons crossed the left side of my chest. The Distinguished Service Cross hung at my throat. Silver insignia marked the rank I had held before leaving active service. I looked in the mirror and saw every version of myself my family had refused to imagine. The 19-year-old thrown onto the street, the recruit learning to sleep in rain, the operator carrying a wounded friend, the founder wiring computers in a freight depot, the chairman signing agreements governments depended on, and the catering worker carrying plates while his brother celebrated a contract that belonged to him. None of those men canceled the others. Power did not erase humiliation. It placed it in context. At 5:20, the receiver's convoy reached Miller Industrial Headquarters. Security secured the executive floors without resistance. Liam was not there. He had returned to the mansion after the gala, apparently believing he could solve the crisis from home. At 5:40, auditors entered the company's servers and discovered that several files had been scheduled for deletion. The preservation order stopped the process. At 6:05, Helena's team reached the mansion gates with the deputy marshal, 2 locksmiths, inventory specialists, and 12 Aegis security officers. Isaac reported that the gates were locked electronically, and household staff had been ordered not to admit anyone. Helena presented the order through the intercom. My mother responded that the property belonged to the Miller family and threatened to call the governor. The deputy marshal informed her that interference could result in arrest. The gates opened 3 minutes later. Our helicopter lifted from the Aegis field at 6:12. Dawn spread slowly beneath us, turning the city from black to steel gray. From the air, the Miller estate appeared almost peaceful. The mansion sat at the center of manicured lawns, its stone walls glowing beneath the first light. Beyond it stretched the north fields and the line of trees leading toward the ancestral land. As a child, I had believed the estate represented permanence. My grandfather planted the oaks along the eastern drive. My father expanded the house after the company's first major contract. My mother decorated every room to communicate wealth. Yet the property had never been as secure as it appeared. It depended on debt, silence, and the willingness of everyone inside to protect the family myth. We approached from the south. The pilot announced our identification to the security team. Below, Aegis vehicles formed a controlled line near the front entrance. Staff members stood beside the service wing. The deputy marshal waited on the steps. Liam emerged from the house in yesterday's tuxedo trousers and a white shirt open at the collar. He held a phone against his ear and shouted at someone while pointing toward the vehicles. My mother appeared behind him, wearing a silk robe beneath a winter coat. Even from the air, I recognized the rigid way she held herself when reality refused to obey her. The helicopter descended over the western lawn. Rotor wash flattened the grass and sent loose leaves spiraling across the grounds. Liam covered his face and backed toward the steps. My mother did not move. The aircraft touched down 60 yards from the house. Isaac exited first, followed by 2 security officers. I stepped onto the lawn. The cold wind caught the edge of my uniform coat. For several seconds, no one spoke. The sound of the rotors decreased behind me. Liam stared at the decorations across my chest. His expression moved from confusion to disbelief. My mother looked at my face, then the Aegis shield on the helicopter, then the red shield insignia worn by the security team. The pieces finally began to align. "Logan?" she said. It was the first time that evening she used my real name without contempt. I walked toward the steps. The deputy marshal introduced Helena Ruiz and explained the court order. Liam barely listened. "What is this?" he demanded, pointing at my uniform. "A costume?" Isaac stepped forward, but I raised one hand. "It is authorized," I said. "By whom?" "The United States Army, among others." Liam looked at the medal at my throat. He knew enough to recognize it, though not enough to understand its cost. "You were in the military," he whispered. "I told you I did not leave because university was difficult." My mother's eyes remained fixed on the helicopter. "Why is Aegis here?" "They are securing collateral for the receiver." "What does that have to do with you?" I removed the red leather case from inside my coat. I opened it and showed her the seal. In daylight, the shield looked darker than it had in the library. "Last night, you asked where I obtained this." Howard Price's warning must have returned to her because her face changed. Liam stepped down one stair. "You work for them." "Yes." "What are you, some security director?" "No." Mara's sedan entered through the open gates and stopped near the convoy. She emerged with Daniel and several board representatives. Liam recognized her immediately from financial media. "That is Mara Voss," he said. "She is the CEO." Mara approached and stopped to my right. "Publicly," she said. "Operationally, I report to the chairman." Liam looked at her, then at me. "Who is the chairman?" Mara did not answer. She did not need to. My mother gripped the stone railing. "No," she said. The word was quiet. "That is not possible." I closed the seal case. Aegis Tactical Solutions was founded 10 years ago. It became Aegis Global 7 years later. The controlling founder has never been publicly identified because our work creates security risks. "You?" Liam asked. "You built Aegis?" "With people who understood loyalty." He laughed once, but no amusement reached his face. "You are lying." Daniel handed him a tablet displaying governance documents, beneficial ownership certifications, and the conditional contract approval bearing the chairman's seal. Liam scrolled through them frantically. "This could be fabricated." Daniel said, "Submitting false documents to a federal marshal would be an unusual strategy for general counsel." My mother descended one step. "You canceled the contract." "Yes, to punish your brother." "I canceled it because Miller Industrial submitted falsified safety certifications, concealed defective materials, and attempted to bribe a subcontractor. The contract required ethical compliance. Your company failed." Liam pointed at me. "Every company negotiates aggressively. You used confidential access to target us. Your bid was reviewed by independent teams. I allowed it to continue longer than it deserved because I hoped you would correct the deficiencies. You chose fraud. We could have fixed the reports after production began." Isaac's expression hardened. People die from sentences like that. Liam ignored him. Restore the contract. We can renegotiate. No. Then the company collapses. The company already collapsed. The contract would only have delayed the public recognition. My mother stepped onto the lawn. Her coat opened slightly in the wind, revealing the silk robe beneath it. Without the ballroom, cameras, and controlled lighting, she looked smaller. Whatever Liam did, the company belongs to this family, she said. Your father built it for his sons. One son falsified records. The other was expelled for discovering it. She flinched. Rebecca told you. She told me Dad learned the truth. Your father made mistakes. So did you. I protected the company. You protected Liam. He stayed. Because you removed every consequence. Liam threw the tablet onto the grass. Stop talking as if you are superior. You abandoned us. You could have returned at any time. You had money, power, all of this, and you allowed Mom to believe you were struggling. You never asked whether I was alive. You made your choice. And last night, you made yours. Helena stepped forward with the court order. Mr. Miller, Mrs. Miller, the receiver now controls the secured estate under the emergency order. You are required to surrender records, financial devices, access keys, and vehicles listed in the collateral schedule. Personal clothing and exempt property may be collected under supervision. Liam stared at her. You cannot take this house. The bank owns the loan. The bank sold the loan, she said. To whom Daniel answered, Bastion, Recovery Holdings. Who owns Bastion? I said. Aegis Capital Partners. My mother's lips parted. You bought our debt, all of it. When the final acquisition closed last week. Liam looked toward the mansion, then the vehicles, then me. You planned this before the party. I planned to protect the assets before you sold them to cover your fraud. The North Estate, my mother said. The waiver. You insisted I disclaim every Miller interest. That established that my creditor actions were not being taken as a competing trust beneficiary. Daniel added, it also waived any claim that Mr. Miller owed fiduciary loyalty to the family trust. Your counsel drafted the language. My mother looked physically unsteady. You tricked us. I read the document you placed in front of me. You knew what would happen. I knew what could happen. You decided whether it would. Liam moved toward me. Isaac and 2 officers shifted instantly, but I raised my hand again. My brother stopped a few feet away. Up close, exhaustion had broken the polish of his face. You cannot do this to me, he said. I am your brother. Last night I was a welder who should not dream about Miller property. I was angry. You were honest. Fine, I apologize. The speed of it made the word meaningless. Restore the contract and I will tell the board there was a misunderstanding. The board has already suspended you. They cannot. Mara said, the receiver can, and did at 5:42 this morning. Liam turned toward her. You have no idea how to operate our facilities. Aegis has employed 37 former Miller engineers over the past 4 years, she said. Most left because of your management. Several have agreed to assist the receiver. He looked back at me. You stole my people. You dismissed them. My mother came closer. Logan, listen to me. This has gone too far. You wanted us to recognize you. We recognize you. You wanted respect. You have it. There is no reason to humiliate the family publicly. I studied her face. All my childhood, I had imagined what it would feel like to hear her acknowledge me. I thought the words might heal something. Instead, they sounded like another transaction. Respect that appears only after power is revealed is not respect, I said. It is fear. I am not afraid of my son. Her hands were trembling. Then you understand how I felt last night. I was trying to teach you humility. You gave me a false name and sent me into the kitchen. Because you arrived dressed like a laborer, I arrived dressed like myself. How were we supposed to know? The question escaped her before she could stop it. How were we supposed to know you mattered? That was the foundation beneath every excuse. She did not regret mistreating me. She regretted miscalculating my rank. I looked toward the mansion. Staff members had begun carrying document cases from the side entrance. Inventory specialists photographed vehicles. The receiver's team moved efficiently, not triumphantly. You wanted me to renounce the Miller family, I said. I agreed. The document is sealed. My mother's branding became shallow. You cannot mean that. You made it irrevocable. We can destroy it, Daniel said. Copies were transmitted to council and filed with the trust's emergency records at 12:37. Liam cursed. I continued. Now, as chairman of Aegis Global and controlling creditor of the secured estate, I am requiring you to leave this property. My mother stared at me. This is my home. It was pledged against the debt you approved. Where are we supposed to go? Your personal accounts remain available unless they are tied to fraudulent transfers. The receiver has arranged temporary accommodation for 48 hours. Liam said, "You want us homeless?" "No. I want you removed from collateral you no longer control." The difference is one of the many things responsible management requires understanding. I checked my watch. The marshal has authorized a reasonable collection period. Because records are at risk, unrestricted access ends in 10 minutes. After that, you may retrieve personal belongings only under supervision. My mother's face crumpled for the first time. It was not the elegant sadness she performed at funerals and charity events, it was panic. 10 minutes? That is the period security recommends before the executive wing is sealed. I gave birth to you. And you spent 10 years treating that fact as a debt I could never repay. Everything I did was for this family. No. Everything you did was for the version of the family that kept you in control. Liam turned and ran toward the house. 2 inventory officers followed him. My mother remained on the lawn. The helicopter waited behind me with the Aegis shield visible on its side. She looked from the aircraft to my medals. "Were you ever going to tell us?" she asked. "I came home when you invited me." "Why did you not walk into the ballroom and say who you were?" "Because I wanted to know who you were when you believed I had nothing." She closed her eyes. That answer reached somewhere the others had not. For a brief moment, I saw the mother who once sat beside my hospital bed when I broke my arm at 11. She had held my hand all night and threatened every nurse who took too long. Human beings are rarely monsters in every memory. That is why their cruelty can keep us trapped. We spend years trying to recover the person who occasionally loved us from the person who repeatedly caused harm. "I thought you hated us," she whispered. "I stopped expecting you to care. Your father loved you. He chose pride over finding me. He was ashamed. So was I. I was 19. She opened her eyes. "What happens now?" "The company enters restructuring. Viable factories remain open. Workers are paid. Fraudulent divisions close. The ancestral land will not be sold. You waived your claim. I waived my family trust interest." Aegis acquired the secured note, attached to the proposed refinancing, and obtained a preservation injunction preventing transfer. The land remains in the trust unless a court determines otherwise. Then it is still ours. It belongs to the trust, not to Liam's creditors. She looked almost relieved. "You are saving it. For a different purpose, I had decided during the flight. The original farmhouse and surrounding acreage would become the Miller Ward Center for veterans and industrial recovery, named partly for my grandfather and partly for Sergeant Thomas Ward, Isaac's younger brother, who died during the extraction operation that led to Aegis's creation. The center would provide housing, technical training, trauma treatment, and engineering apprenticeships for veterans and displaced workers. The forests and cemetery would remain protected. The land would no longer serve as a private monument to one family's status. It would become useful. My mother listened without speaking. "You are giving away our inheritance," she said finally. "I am restoring its purpose. Your grandparents wanted it kept in the family. Then perhaps the family should become larger than 3 people protecting a surname." Liam reappeared at the front entrance carrying a leather bag and 2 laptop computers. An officer stopped him and checked the devices against the collateral list. One belonged to Miller Industrial and was confiscated. Liam shouted, but the deputy marshal intervened. Household staff brought several suitcases to the drive. My mother watched the process in silence. At 6:42, Helena formally secured the residence. My mother and Liam were escorted to a waiting vehicle arranged by the receiver. Before entering, Liam turned toward me. "You think this makes you king?" he asked. The question might have sounded dramatic from anyone else. From him, it was the last defense of a man who believed power existed only to dominate. "No," I said. "It makes me responsible. You destroyed Dad's company. You did that. I am deciding what survives." He entered the car. My mother paused beside the door. "Will I see you again?" she asked. I could have punished her with certainty. I could have said never. Instead, I told the truth. "I do not know." She nodded slowly and sat beside Liam. The vehicle drove away beneath the oaks my grandfather had planted. I watched until it disappeared through the gates. The silence afterward did not feel victorious. It felt clean. Mara joined me on the steps. "The board is waiting," she said. "Of course they are. Media helicopters will arrive within 20 minutes. Release the ethics termination statement. Do not identify me unless required." She looked at my uniform and the Aegis helicopter occupying the lawn. "That may be difficult." "Then identify the restructuring, not the family conflict. The story will emerge. Facts can emerge. Spectacle does not need assistance." Isaac approached, carrying the catering name tag, Luke. "One of the staff found this on a tray," he said. "I took it from him." "Keep it," Mara said. "Frame it in the boardroom." "Absolutely not. The Empire should remember where it found its king." I looked at her. "Do not call me that." Isaac almost smiled. "You chose a company named Aegis, use a red shield, arrive by helicopter in dress uniform, and reclaim a family industrial empire at dawn. You have lost the right to object to symbolism." I placed the name tag in my pocket. "The company is not being reclaimed for me." "No," Mara said. "That is why people follow you." By noon, Miller Industrial's collapse was the largest business story in the state. Reporters initially described Aegis's contract termination as a sudden reversal. Hours later, regulatory filings revealed the debt acquisition and receivership. Liam issued a statement accusing an unnamed competitor of a hostile takeover. The statement disappeared after Daniel reminded his attorney that false public accusations could violate the preservation order. My mother released no statement. Photographs of the helicopter spread online, along with images of me in uniform. Military journalists identified the decorations. Business reporters connected my name to early Aegis filings. Within 48 hours, the secrecy surrounding my ownership became impossible to preserve. Aegis issued a controlled disclosure confirming that I was its founder and controlling chairman. The market response was chaotic. Analysts wanted interviews. Networks offered exclusive profiles. Politicians who had ignored my calls a decade earlier sent congratulations. Former classmates wrote messages claiming they had always known I would succeed. I accepted none of the interviews. The story people wanted was simple. Rejected son returns as billionaire soldier and takes everything from cruel family. The truth was less convenient. I had not returned to display wealth. I returned because a legal signature was needed, and because some unfinished part of me wanted to know whether home had changed. It had not. Power merely allowed me to stop pretending the damage was love. The restructuring took 18 months. Under Helena's receivership, Miller Industrial was divided into viable and failed operations. 3 manufacturing plants survived. 2 closed after environmental and safety audits revealed problems too severe to justify continued operation. Aegis funded severance, retraining, and relocation for affected workers. Long-term pension obligations were transferred into a protected trust. Small suppliers received negotiated payments before unsecured executive lenders. Liam's private aircraft, luxury vehicles, and corporate apartments were sold. His wife filed for divorce after investigators froze the offshore trust he had created in her name. Regulators charged him with securities fraud, falsification of safety data, obstruction, and attempted asset concealment. He avoided prison on some counts by cooperating, but later received a sentence after deleted emails showed he knowingly approved the defective materials. My mother was not criminally charged. Investigators found that she knew the company was in financial distress and approved the land sale, but they could not prove she understood the technical fraud. She lost most of her wealth through guarantees and civil court settlements. The temporary hotel became a rented townhouse. For the first time since marrying my father, she lived without staff. She sent me letters. The first demanded that I intervene in Liam's case. The second accused me of betraying blood. The third contained copies of childhood photographs. The fourth simply said, "I do not understand how my son became a stranger." I wrote back once. I told her I had become a stranger when she stopped asking questions and began accepting only the answers that protected her favorite child. I told her that being my mother did not entitle her to unlimited access to me. But it did not erase every good memory either. I said contact would require honesty, accountability, and time. She did not reply for 6 months. Then a short letter arrived without accusation. "I knew Liam lied about the files," she wrote. "Not at first, but later. Your father wanted to find you. I convinced him that bringing you back would divide the company. I told myself I was protecting everything he built. The truth is that I was protecting the decision I had already made. If you returned, I would have had to admit I chose the wrong son. I read the letter 3 times. It was not an apology, but it was the first honest sentence she had ever given me about that night. I placed it in a drawer and continued working. Forgiveness did not arrive as a dramatic reunion. It arrived as the ability to remember without allowing the memory to command me. The ancestral estate changed quickly. Construction crews restored the farmhouse, converted unused buildings into residences, and built workshops beside the old equipment barns. The first residents of the Miller Ward Center arrived the following spring. Veterans recovering from injuries, former factory workers training in advanced manufacturing, military spouses studying logistics, and young engineers from families who could not afford university tuition. Isaac directed the security and leadership program. Caleb Hart, an engineer I had recruited from one of our earliest acquisitions, designed the fabrication laboratory. Mara established a scholarship in memory of the communications specialist who died during our extraction mission. My grandparents' cemetery remained untouched beneath the oaks. Near the entrance, we installed a simple stone graved with words my grandfather once wrote in a factory manual. What we build must carry more than our own weight. The mansion became the administrative and residential center. I removed the oversized portraits from the ballroom, including Liam's. My father's original photograph returned to a smaller wall beside images of machinists, welders, soldiers, nurses, and engineers. The kitchen where my mother placed me in a servant's uniform became the training for culinary and hospitality programs serving for veterans in transition. On the first anniversary of the receivership, the center held a dinner in the restored ballroom. There were no senators at the head table, no hierarchy of family importance, and no hidden workers eating behind doors. Residents, instructors, donors, security officers, and kitchen staff sat together. Denise, the catering supervisor who had ordered me to carry trays during the anniversary party, had become the center's hospitality director. She did not learn who I was until the news reports appeared. When we met again, she apologized for calling me late. I told her she had treated me more fairly than my family had. She had expected me to work because I wore the uniform, not because she believed I was worthless. Before dinner, she handed me a tray of champagne and said, "For old times." I carried it to the first table. No one stopped me. Service no longer felt like humiliation because no one was using it to define my rank. Liam saw photographs of the dinner while awaiting sentencing. Through his attorney, he requested a meeting. I refused twice. After my mother's honest letter, I agreed to meet him in a secure conference room at the courthouse. He wore a gray suit without a tie. The arrogance had not disappeared entirely, but fear had reduced it. We sat across from each other beneath fluorescent lights. "Did you come to enjoy this?" he asked. "No. Then why are you here?" "You requested the meeting." He looked at his hands. "I remember the night you found the hydraulic reports." "So do I." I was 21. I was 19. Dad had finally started trusting me. The contract was supposed to prove I could handle responsibility. If the defect became public, he would have removed me. "So you altered the records." "I thought the components would hold." "They failed. No one died. 2 maintenance crews were injured." He looked away. "I did not know that until later." "You knew enough to lie." His jaw tightened. "You always acted superior. I wanted you to stop shipping defective parts. You wanted Dad to choose you." The accusation contained a fragment of truth. I had wanted my father to believe me. I had wanted the family to recognize that integrity mattered more than birth order. "Perhaps I did," I said. Liam looked surprised. "You admit it?" Wanting to be chosen did not make the components safe. Silence settled between us. "Mom chose me," he said eventually. "Every time." "Yes. Do you know what that does to someone?" "It teaches them consequences are optional. It teaches them love can disappear the moment they fail." I studied him. For the first time, he sounded less like my enemy and more like another child raised inside the same damaged system. The difference was that his wounds had been padded with privilege, while mine were sharpened by rejection. Pain explained him. It did not excuse the people he endangered. "You did fail," I said. "So did I, many times. The difference is that people around me were allowed to tell me." "You took everything." "No, The court took secured assets after you defaulted. The receiver preserved what could survive. Your decisions took the rest. You could have saved me. I saved the employees you were prepared to sacrifice." He laughed bitterly. "The king saves the peasants and lets his brother burn. There is no king. Everyone at Aegis treats you like one. They challenge me more than anyone in this family ever challenged you." He leaned back. "Do you hate me?" I considered the question. "I hated what you were allowed to become. I hated that Mom chose your lies because they protected her pride. I hated Dad for discovering the truth and still not finding me. But hatred is expensive, Liam. I have more useful obligations." His eyes filled with tears he refused to release. "What happens when I get out?" "That depends on what you build when no one is required to applaud." We did not embrace. I did not promise employment, money, or reconciliation. I left him with responsibility, the one inheritance our family had withheld from him. 2 years later, my mother visited the Miller Word Center. She came without a publicist, attorney, or driver. Denise called my office and said an older woman was waiting in the kitchen. I found her seated at the preparation island wearing a plain blue coat. The room was quiet between lunch and dinner service. Sunlight passed through the new windows. She looked around and said, "You kept the kitchen. It is larger now. You changed everything else." "Not everything." She touched the counter. "Your father used to make pancakes here on Sundays. Before the company became too important." She nodded. "For a while, we listened to the ventilation system." "I saw the training workshops," she said. "They told me 200 people have completed the program. 216. And the factories? 3 are profitable. The energy division supplies Aegis and several public infrastructure projects. So Miller Industrial survived. Parts of it, under another name. The restructured company was called Ward Miller Engineering, placing service before family." "Name's not the same as legacy," I said. She accepted that. Then she removed an envelope from her bag. Inside was the original photograph of my father walking me through the factory at 6 years old. I wore the oversized yellow hard hat. He was crouched beside me, one hand pointing toward a line of steel frames. "I found this in storage," she said. "He kept it in his desk after you left." On the back, my father had written, "Logan sees the load before he sees the machine." I ran my thumb over the words. My mother watched me. "He was proud of you," she said. "Pride without action is a private luxury. I know." We stood in the kitchen where she had tried to reduce me to a servant. "I was cruel to you that night," she said. "Only that night?" She closed her eyes briefly. It was still difficult for her. Honesty had never been a language she spoke without an accent. "I saw your clothes and your hands," she continued, "and I felt relieved. I thought life had proved me right. I thought if you were unsuccessful, then what we did to you had been justified. And when you learned the truth, I was afraid of you. You were afraid of losing the house. At first." She looked through the kitchen doors toward the ballroom. "Then I was afraid because I realized I did not know my own son. You had lived an entire life that did not require me. That was the life you forced me to create. Yes." She spoke the word quietly. No defense followed it. We did not repair 10 years in one conversation. We walked through the center. She met veterans learning robotics, former Miller workers teaching apprentices, and families living in the restored guest wings. At the memorial garden, she stopped before Sergeant Ward's name. Isaac stood at a distance but did not approach. My mother read the description of the operation that inspired Aegis, though the classified details remained absent. "You built the company because someone died?" she asked. "We built it because systems failed the people depending on them." "Like our family, yes." Near sunset, she prepared to leave. At the entrance, she asked whether she could return. "Not as the owner," I said. "I know. Not as the matriarch. I know, as a visitor, perhaps." She nodded. That was the beginning of a limited relationship. She came once every few months. Sometimes we spoke. Sometimes she volunteered in the records room, cataloging old factory photographs. She never regained control of the estate or company. Accountability does not require restoring access to the conditions that enabled harm. But over time, she learned to sit at tables without deciding who deserved the best chair. Liam served his sentence and entered a supervised industrial ethics program after release. He did not join Aegis. He found work with a small manufacturing cooperative in another state, beginning as a compliance assistant. The owner called me before hiring him. I told the truth about his history and said the decision should be based on evidence of change, not my forgiveness. 3 years later, Liam sent a photograph of a safety certification bearing his signature. On the back, he wrote, "I read every test." I kept the photograph but did not answer immediately. Healing, like engineering, requires load testing. A bridge is not trusted because it promises to hold. It is trusted because it carries weight repeatedly without hiding its fractures. Aegis Global continued to grow, though the public revelation of my role changed my life. I could no longer enter airports without recognition or attend industry meetings anonymously. Headlines called me the ghost chairman, the soldier billionaire, and, inevitably, the king of Aegis. I disliked all of them. Empires built around a single personality eventually become prisons for everyone inside. I expanded the governing board, distributed authority, and created succession rules designed to survive my absence. Mara accused me of reacting too strongly to the spectacle at the mansion. She was partly right. I had seen how easily admiration could become another version of my family's favoritism. I refused to build a company that required one infallible son. The red seal remained in my office safe. I used it only twice more. Once to authorize the transfer of patents into an employee-controlled trust, and once to prevent an Aegis subsidiary from accepting a profitable contract with a government engaged in systematic civilian abuse. Beside the safe, inside a small frame commissioned despite my objections, was the plastic catering tag that read "Luck." Underneath it, she placed a brass plate engraved with one sentence: "Authority reveals character. Invisibility reveals it first." I eventually allowed the frame to remain. Not because I wanted to remember the humiliation, but because leaders need reminders of how people behave toward those they believe cannot affect them. When I walked through Aegis kitchens, warehouses, security posts, or maintenance rooms, I watched how executives spoke to the people working there. Technical brilliance could be taught. Strategy could be refined. Contempt was a structural defect. On the 5th anniversary of the Dawn receivership, the Miller Ward Center held a ceremony on the western lawn. A new residence for wounded veterans was opening near the tree line. The same landing area where the Aegis helicopter had touched down had been converted into a community garden, though a smaller emergency pad remained beyond the barns. Hundreds of people attended. My mother sat near the middle rather than the front. Liam stood at the edge of the crowd, uncertain whether he belonged. I approached and offered him a seat. He looked toward our mother. "With the family?" he asked. "With everyone." The ceremony began after sunrise. Isaac spoke about Sergeant Ward. Mara discussed the center's growth. A young woman named Sofia Alvarez described arriving after losing both legs during military service and later designing an adaptive manufacturing system now used in 3 factories. When it was my turn, I stood before the mansion without medals, security formations, or a title displayed behind me. I told the crowd that buildings remember the purpose assigned to them. The mansion had once been a symbol of exclusion, debt, and inherited power. Now its rooms housed people rebuilding their lives. The factories had once concealed failures to protect a family name. Now their testing systems were publicly audited and partly owned by employees. The land had once been treated as an asset to sell during a crisis. Now it carried the weight of hundreds of futures. 5 years ago, I said, I arrived here believing I was reclaiming property from people who had abused it. I was wrong. Property is not reclaimed when one powerful person replaces another. It is reclaimed when its purpose becomes larger than the conflict that damaged it. I looked toward the kitchen windows. Denise stood there with several apprentices. I spent the previous night inside that kitchen wearing a servant's uniform because my family believed a man's value could be measured by where he was permitted to sit. Many people here know that experience. You have been judged by a uniform, a job title, a bank balance, an injury, a mistake, or a chapter someone else chose to make permanent. This center exists because no single chapter should have that authority. After the ceremony, my mother found me near the old oak line. "You never told them what you said to us," she said. "Which part?" 10 minutes. A faint, embarrassed smile touched her face. The newspapers turned it into a legend. Legends usually remove the court orders and inventory forms. They say you descended from the sky and expelled us. That is approximately what happened, only with more attorneys. She laughed. It was the first uncomplicated laugh I had heard from her. Liam joined us carrying 3 cups of coffee. He handed one to me. "No tray?" I asked. I considered it. We stood together beneath the trees, not restored to the family we had been, but perhaps beginning something more honest. There was no dramatic forgiveness. No promise that blood erased consequence. My mother still had moments when she tried to control the conversation. Liam still defended himself too quickly. I still withdrew when conflict resembled old patterns. But now those failures were named. No one was required to protect them. That was the difference. People often ask whether I planned the anniversary night as revenge. They want to know whether I allowed Liam to announce the contract so I could destroy him publicly. Whether I wore plain clothes to test my mother. And whether I knew the red seal would terrify them before I placed it on the waiver. The honest answer is complicated. I knew Miller Industrial was failing. I knew the contract could be canceled. I knew acquiring the debt would give Aegis control if the company defaulted. I knew my family needed my signature. I also knew some part of me wanted to enter the mansion without visible power and discover whether I would be treated as a son. That part of the plan was not strategic. It was the remaining hope of a 19-year-old standing outside a duffel bag, waiting for someone to call him back. No one called. 10 years later, they opened the gate only because they needed land. The revenge was not that I became wealthier or more powerful than they imagined. The revenge was that their judgment no longer determined my choices. When my mother handed me the servant's uniform, I could wear it without becoming what she believed. When Liam called me a failed welder, I did not need to list my metals or companies. When they forced the waiver in front of me, I could sign away the family identity they had weaponized, because I had built one they could not revoke. The contract disappeared with one call, but the empire behind that call had been constructed through 10 years of discipline no insult could erase. At dawn, when the helicopter landed and Aegis security crossed the lawn, it looked as though an empire had arrived to reclaim its king. That is the version people prefer because it turns pain into a clean image. The servant becomes the chairman, the rejected soldier becomes the decorated commander, the abandoned son returns with absolute authority. But I was never a king, and Aegis was never truly mine alone. It belonged to the operator who died beside me, the engineer who wrote code during an attack, the veterans who found a second life in its workshops, the analysts who challenged bad orders, the workers who refused to hide defects, and every person who understood that protection without accountability becomes control. The empire did not reclaim me from the kitchen. It reminded me that no kitchen, ballroom, uniform, surname, or family verdict had ever possessed the power to define me. I had carried that power into the house myself, hidden beneath a jacket that did not fit, inside a red leather case no one recognized until it was too late. My mother believed she was placing me where I belonged. Liam believed he was forcing a poor man to surrender an inheritance. They did not understand that the land, the contract, the debt, and the company were already resting inside a structure larger than their imagination. They saw a servant because servants were invisible to them. They saw calloused hands and assumed those hands had failed. They saw silence and mistook it for shame. What they did not see was the soldier who had learned to wait, the founder who had learned to build without applause, and the chairman who knew that the strongest position in any room is not always the chair at the head of the table. Sometimes it is the doorway. Sometimes it is the shadows near the kitchen. Sometimes it is the man carrying a tray, listening while everyone reveals exactly who they are. On that anniversary night, my family believed they were celebrating 30 years of the Miller Empire. In truth, they were witnessing its final audit. Every toast, insult, false claim, and forced signature became evidence. By sunrise, the empire built on favoritism, debt, and concealed failure had fallen. What remained was not my throne. It was raw material, steel, land, workers, memory, and consequence. I took what could still carry weight, removed what could not, and began again. That was what my father had once taught me, before pride made him forget it. A structure does not survive because of the name engraved above the entrance. It survives because someone has the courage to inspect the foundation, expose the cracks, and replace the parts that were never strong enough to hold. Goodbye.